I've said multiple times in my own past, and if you see the frustration in my voice, I was interrupted in trying to make this, and I have no ability to pause in the middle of a production to go deal with something in the other room. I get irritated when people approach me at all during, recording. Fuck them. Leave me the fuck alone. Anyways, I've talked multiple times in the past that I believe that systematic oppression is a legitimate concept, and that the people that deny it are just merely in denial, and that denial is not just a river in Egypt. Basically, there's a truth that has been proven to me, which is essentially that systematic oppression of the Black community is not, just something these people are talking about. And when I go into this, I would say that redlining is really the central case that I would make for it. But of course, there are white people who imagine themselves to be smarter than they really are, that say that redlining was abolished in the 1950s and that it has no effect today. But this is delusional thinking. It's a delusional way of denying the overlooked truth, an obvious truth. Anybody who has invested money in the stock market understands the concept of compounding interest. Anybody who talks about investing and has given financial advice has reminded us that time in the market is far more important than actually timing the market. The conclusion from those two statements, however, means that redlining still has an effect today and will always have an effect because the Black community was denied by redlining the ability to collect compound interest and lift themselves up financially. Many of them have overcome incredible barriers, to entry and to the markets and to, exclusion, and overcome very significant, boundaries that were meant to keep them out and prevent them from being included in everything. And when I talk about all of these issues, I have to go into it because I'm about to talk about something that isn't all that friendly to the Black community. I am venomously pissed off at this point, and it's a good thing that these people live so far away from me that I can't literally assault them for this, because I'm that angry. It will simmer in time, in the due course of time, but this is my immediate feeling about all of this. I mean, it is. I promise you, I will not act on this aggression that I'm feeling, but it is very intense what I'm feeling. Um, So, detail wise, I would say that the SWFA has issued a smear campaign against a prolific author that I'm very much so a fan of, who goes by the name Mercedes Lackey. I would characterize it as a smear campaign for the primary reason that that they went and issued a statement that alleges, in a false accusation in their statement, that Mercedes Lackey used a slur, a racial slur, in what she said. But if you look at their statement, it would be a reasonable person would conclude that she dropped the N word multiple times when referring to this author. Instead, you know, she referred to a Black author who she was giving a compliment to, and the words "amazing" among other things were exchanged. She was dropping his name, in order to include him, and basically, that's the nature of her character. She will go out of her way to include groups of people that have been, downtrodden and excluded by society, and that's part of the reason why I have an enormous admiration for this woman. She has written novel after novel that included the LGBTQIA community, has written transgendered characters, has written gay characters, has run the gauntlet and made book after book after book that went out of their way to include these people. Despite this, however, at the conference, she referred to this man as colored, and there's an attempt by certain segments to say that colored, as colored is a slur. It's what they're trying to say, but this is a false characterization of the term. It is inaccurate to call, it is inaccurate to allege that calling somebody a colored person is a slur. The truth of the matter about the term colored is that it carries a negative baggage because of the fact that in the old segregation era of the past, there were things, there were signs that were up like no colored people. So for people from a certain era using this term, despite the fact that it was not never fully intended always by every person using this term, and that there was greater ambiguity in it, and that some people had been using it in a way that was not intended to inflict harm, the way that many people who shared my skin color were in the segregation era South. I am not somebody that is going out of my way to oppress you in any of this. I'm pissed off about a smear campaign. It is true, you know, in every sense of the word, that the word colored person has a lot of negative baggage. That, however, does not mean that it rises to, to a word that is qualified to be a slur. It is not a slur. It is merely a word that has a lot of negative baggage. And that is the problem with what has happened. If you look at what the SWFA statement said, a reasonable person would conclude that Mercedes Lackey had called them, a bunch of the N words and dropped it multiple fucking times on this author. Instead, this author was not bothered by how she referred to him. She's 71. A reasonable person would also think that back then, the, the terms were you wouldn't get in as much trouble for using them as you would today, but she's being woke scolded by somebody that's like literally it almost looks like this person, she talked about having an out of body experience, and it almost looks like she's sputtering, in rage, that how dare she refer to this man as any word other than black. And that's what kills me about this. The SWFA, the people that are bringing the Nebula Awards apparently are a bunch of spineless, weak cowards who will not stand by one of the people that they just dropped their grandest award to in this. Instead, they are participating as active co-conspirators in the smear campaign that has been launched against Mercedes Lackey. Now, Mercedes Lackey, is a completely different person than I am. I would like to have that noted because I am processing this with rage. Mercedes Lackey is yielding and giving them, humility and an apology. Well, I'm not her. I admire her and I admire her humility, but I think that this, it's a smear campaign that has been launched against her, and it is a fundamental injustice that she has been subjected to. The SWFA is now falsely accusing her of it. What they allege is a slur is a false characterization of the term. She has now been basically subjected to a smear campaign by a woke SJW mob. I used to think that the SJWs didn't really exist. That's all I have to say about that one. You may believe, I don't mind even. I won't use the term colored person as much myself. I would tend to refer to these people as black people, but what it blows me away, you know, the attempt to elevate what was a term that was not always used in the kind of, way, the hurtful way that they're talking about, into being a slur. You know, Mercedes Lackey has now been the recipient and, has now been subjected to a smear campaign that has been launched against her by an organization that is apparently full of spineless cowards that bent the knee to an author that is a brand new entry into the space and has written nowhere near as much as Lackey has, who is nowhere near as prolific of a writer as she is, who doesn't have novels to her name. She has novellas to her name, and that's about it. She doesn't actually have much of anything as far as her writing career, and yet she was able to take an author that is far more prolific than her down a peg. And that is just it. It feels like somebody is just on a power trip in all of this, and that they've gone way too far in that power trip. Look at what the statement from the SWFA actually turned out to be. They said that she used a racial slur. But what was the racial slur that she used? would be the first thing to ask. And when you go and you find out that she dropped the term colored person, it all becomes very, very, very controversial and very, 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 subjective. The truth of the matter is the term colored has never been a slur. It has merely been a word that had a lot of negative baggage to it. The SWFA can call it a slur, but the SWA is not the final authority in any of this. They do not have the right to tell us what that term actually is. They do not have the right to dictate to us that that term is a freaking slur. And to those of you who would basically come forward and tell me that I don't get to define it for myself, like hell, I'll allow that to happen. I am a fully grown adult at this point, and I will decide for myself what actually rises to meet the definition of a slur. Colored was not always meant even pejoratively, ever, necessarily. Some people used it derisively, others used it descriptively, and that is the world of the past. And moving forward today we usually call them black people. But as far as the smear campaign here, it really looks like there's a bunch of people that literally lacked a spine that decided to throw somebody under the bus who had done more for the excluded groups than many people who actually have that skin color had over their entire lives. You know, she's done a lot for the black community. She really has. And all of those accomplishments are going to be ignored, in all of this. And she's been beside herself in grief and crying about it. And of course, they decided to cancel Larry Dixon, like her actual husband, you know, on top of all of this just because of guilt by association and all of this. This is beyond disgusting. The people behind it are disgusting and creepy. I condemn it with everything in me, and I'm truly disappointed by everything that has happened. The way that it has gone down as well has been slimy and has an energy of just sliminess to it. The lack of honor, the lack of discretion that was shown for her, the lack of respect, in this accusation has been astonishing to say the least. The manner in which it's gone down, when people read the SWFA's, statement, they're going to think that, she said something that was much worse than what she actually said. And, what is happening is somebody is just throwing a fit that they were not referred to as a black person. They're literally throwing a temper tantrum over it. So, um, yeah, this whole thing, it's a farcical joke, and it is ruining science fiction, and it's incredibly disappointing to see.